Hi, thanks for joining me. We've had a few wee technical issues this evening. Hopefully you can hear me this time as well as see me. If you can, just say hi. We're at the middle of a competition at the moment. I'll talk about this a wee bit while we wait for other people to join. We're giving away a editor's proof copy of When the Mask Falls. It might be this one. There's actually only a couple of these left now. 2 of them have already been sent out to people that have won them. The editor's proofs are pretty special. This is not a finished copy of the book. This it has the story in, it has the cover on, but it's really just for me to have a look and see what the book looks like, see how it feels, see what the fonts are like, see what the text size is like. And when you get your editor's proof, you know, this is your last chance to make sure that this is what you actually want to produce. So these are really kind of special. I only made 5 of these. 3 of them have already gone to prize winners. This is the last one that can be won. One of them is available to buy actually through Kickstarter. But the one that's still available to win, it's dead easy. Just go through all my posts on Facebook between the 1st of March and the 25th of between the 1st of February and the 25th of February, and look for any post that has hashtag When the Mask Falls written on it. When you find one, like it, then share it. And it could be you winning this. I will reveal the winner of this next Sunday whenever I do my last live reading. So you have a week to go back and find some posts, and I'm sure there'll be a few more added up this week as well. So keep your eye out for them. So what's been happening? We've got 2 weeks to go of the Kickstarter campaign, and we're doing great. We're more than a third of the way there, which is fantastic. And some of my fellow authors have been looking over my work, and I've had some reviews coming in as well, which is amazing, and I'm posting them up in the update section on my Kickstarter page as we go. One of them described me as a gifted storyteller, which was really exciting for me and meant I had a very big head all day, and still do a little bit, so I'm still revealing from that. But you're here to hear me read from When the Mask Falls. I've decided to read from chapter 2. You've already seen chapter 1. If you haven't, go to kickstarter.com and look up the updates. If you find When the Mask Falls, look in the update section. Update 8 has chapter 1 written. You can just sit there and read that in your own time. But I chose chapter 2 to read from today because it's the first chapter I actually wrote of the book. I did it while I was actually writing another book. I got a bit of writer's block and didn't really know how to get past it, so I did a writing exercise which basically asks you to just write whatever your imagination is really wanting to say, whatever's in your head, get it out, so that you can go back to your more creative writing. And what came out was actually chapters 2 and 4. I really loved them. I couldn't forget about them. Even tried to go back to the other piece of work, but all I could think about was finishing those. I loved Alice. I loved the chapter that I'd written for her, and I loved the possibilities that came from it. My imagination got a bit carried away, and really I went back to it and didn't stop writing until I'd finished this entire first draft. So it's a really exciting chapter, because if it hadn't have been for that, this book would never really have been written. So here we go. Tea's ready. I don't know why I bothered shouting. Even in my most booming voice, I had no hope of competing with Sarah and Ben's stereos, both barking hostile melodies through the walls and ceiling in a bitter struggle for musical supremacy. Tea! Once upon a time, my 2 little cherubs, the apples of my proud eye, would sit at the kitchen island begging to help while I cooked, stirring, mashing, or mixing, when there was nothing left to do, drawing cute pictures of houses and trees and ponies, eagerly anticipating the results of Mummy's efforts. Then one dark day, my little angels turned into Satan's pawns, minions of the devil. They became teenagers, and I became their housekeeper, taxi, cook, social secretary, their slave. Life would never be the same again in the Walker household. Still no sign, and tea getting, if not already cold. Time for plan B, I thought, and dropped to my knees. The fuse box was under the stairs, and I had become quite accustomed to squeezing myself into the cupboard with my torch, reaching past the hoover and the filter coffee maker that, apart from the day it was unpacked, had never been used, and pulling the cover off the electric box. Third switch from the right disabled the electrics upstairs, and moments later a heavenly silence filled the house. Silence never lasted long in my house, and minutes later a stampeding army thundered down the stairs, voices shouting incoherently at each other and at me. I reversed out of the cupboard, dusted my jeans, and readjusted my ponytail. Tea's ready. They both grunted, and I followed them into the kitchen. They slumped in their chairs, and I sat opposite. Where's Dad? Ben poked at his lamb chop with his fork. "He's working late. He said he would drop me at Steve's. I can take you." "Well, if you're dropping Ben, you can drop me at Stacy's. It's on the way," said Starr. "What's wrong with your car?" I said. "Nothing. Just thought I might have a few drinks." "Okay, that sounds nice." And that pretty much summed up our evening's polite dinner conversation. We continued our meal in silence, well, except from the constant beeping from mobile phones that had become a recent but uninvited guest at the dinner table. "This is shit," Ben announced, in his least grateful tone, as he got up and banged his mostly uneaten plate of food down by the sink and marched out of the kitchen. He got no argument from me. I hadn't eaten meat since a farm trip with my parents when I was 8, so it probably was shit, and I wouldn't know. My vegetable grill was very nice, but somehow I couldn't see the little carnivore trying one. There was still no sign of Michael when I started to clear the plates. No surprise, really. He was rarely ever home these days, so I wrapped his plate with cling film and placed it in the microwave for later. I cleared the rest of the dishes, stacked the dishwasher, and washed up the last few items that wouldn't fit. I had been looking forward to a quiet evening in with the iron, but Ben and Sarah were both eager to get out, and driving them around for 20 minutes or so seemed a small price to pay for an empty and peaceful house, so we all piled out into the cold winter night and into my new Audi TT, a guilty offering for poor neglected Alice, compensation from an absent husband. What would I get next time I complained about the state of our boring marriage, I wondered. Maybe a Florida beach house, or a private jet. But how about a loving and attentive husband? Not unless Harrods have started stocking them, I suspect. As per my explicit instructions, I obediently dropped Sarah off first at the prearranged spot just out of sight of her friend's house. My delightful 18-year-old, who once wore pigtails and pretty pink dresses, now strode down the street with more piercings than I could count, wearing a pair of knee-high leather stiletto-heeled boots with more buckles than was strictly required, and were probably too high to walk in anyway, a skirt that was arguably too short, and a thin jacket that was definitely too light for this November evening. My sweet angel. My 16-year-old son was slightly easier to please, and I dropped him only 2 doors away from his friend's house wearing a pair of dirty Doc Marten boots, laces trailing behind him, filthy jeans that I had offered to wash, only to be told that's how you're supposed to wear them, a hoodie that, on the back, instructed the reader to do something that I am convinced is physically impossible, and no jacket. Apparently it's cool to be cold these days. Having completed my taxi duties, I turned the car around in the road and started in the direction of home. That ironing wasn't going to get done without at least some input from me. Well, sometimes it did, but only when I was daydreaming, in which case it was a beautiful Brazilian man, a 6 foot tall, shoulder-length black hair, and a body as hard as granite. Now I think about it, the ironing didn't get done then either. The car drove itself while I daydreamed of Andre, standing by the ironing board, all tanned in his tiny Y fronts, and before I realised it, I had missed my turn off. Well, 3 turns actually, and I was heading into town. I cursed and searched for a suitable place to turn. My headlights found a car parked to my left, which offered a perfect turning spot, so I flickered the indicator on and pulled in. The car park belonged to a pub. It was quite full, which seemed odd to me, as drinking and driving were certainly not a recommended combination. In any case, I found a space at the back, which I turned into, manoeuvred the gear stick into reverse position, and sat there, the car eagerly awaiting my instruction. Watching in the rearview mirror, I saw a young couple, maybe in their early 20s, exit the pub. They were holding hands and laughing together, and looked very much in love. We used to be like that, me and Michael, that is, but that was more than 18 years ago. These days we were lucky to get out at all, even if it was my 40th birthday. I racked my brain trying to remember the last time we went anywhere at all together. My memory failed me, but it was a long time ago, I can be sure of that. The pub looked friendly enough, and I imagined what it might be like on the inside. People drinking, laughing. Sod it, the ironing could wait another day. Not that anyone would notice the difference. Most of the clothes looked the same when I had finished assaulting them with the iron anyway. So I turned the engine off, picked up my handbag from the passenger footwell, and stepped out into the car park. A little flutter rippled through me. I hadn't been to a pub on my own since before I'd met Michael, and here I was heading straight for the door. I dropped the car keys into my handbag and ignored all the safety warnings my brain was currently issuing as I pushed through the heavy door. Oh, Alice, what are you doing? The pub was disproportionately quiet, considering the volume of cars in the car park, but I walked over to the bar and sat myself on a bar stool. A very young and handsome bartender quickly appeared, smiled inanely, and asked what would you like. What would I like? So many possible answers, but I suspect he was only offering me a drink, so I ordered a white rum and Diet Coke. If I'm honest, I was feeling more than a little self-conscious. This was not how I remembered going to pubs when I was younger, and that flutter of excitement had turned into a nervous stutter. I fixed a stare on the beer mat that eloquently reminded me, as if I could forget, that I was sitting in the Fox and Cub pub. I wonder how many units of alcohol it would take to make someone forget the name of the pub they were in. that they would need a beer mat to remind them. Too many, probably. I'm not usually a drinker, and the rum and Diet Coke had an instant effect on me, and I dared myself to look away from the mat. Maybe it was a symptom of my age, but when I was a kid I would have happily walked into some of the roughest dives. Now I just feared the worst wherever I was. The pub seemed nice enough, though. The music in the bar was soft and melodic, not gratingly insistent as I had grudgingly become accustomed at home. There was no TV, and as such no battle over the remote control, no pile of dishes taunting me in the sink, no hunting for dirty socks in the devil's lair that I used to refer to as Ben's room. However, despite the good indicators of a decent environment and the accumulative effect of my beverage, I still wasn't fully at ease, and my fingers were tapping independent of me against the wooden bar. I just wasn't used to doing nothing, and I made a deal with myself to leave as soon as I had finished my heavily priced drink and go home to my comfort zone, the ironing board, and the movie, just as originally planned. I needed something to do in the meantime, and reading the labels on the bottles of spirits that hung upside down along the full length of the bar was not going to adequately fill the time it would take me to finish this drink, so I settled for the staff notice board that was only just in view. Learning about the dramas that currently affected the Fox and Cub was hardly stimulating reading, although I secretly wondered why Gary needed to change his shift at such short notice. I guess I might never know the answer to that, and my eyes started wandering again. They found a man who was also sitting alone. He had harsh, staring eyes and tight, frowning skin, and I found myself wondering what might have made him so tense. Money? Girls, maybe? Just like me, he was sitting at the bar, exactly 6 stools away, actually. His left leg was twitching up and down, and his finger was tracing the rim of his pint glass. For a moment I found him quite intriguing, but only for a moment, because the man suddenly looked up. My gaze urgently diverted back to the beer mat. I could feel heat radiating from my cheeks, and my normally lethargic heart had started pounding like a drummer. God, I hope he hadn't seen me looking at him. I picked up the glass and gripped it between my sweaty hands as I fixed a stare on the beer mat. My eyes couldn't get me into trouble there. Besides, my drink was nearly finished, and the beer mat would do to keep me entertained until I took my last mouthful and trudged back to boring but familiarville. Drinking alone in a bar was definitely not for me, so next time I'll just stick with the housework. With a huge sense of relief, I finished the drink, put the empty glass down on the beer mat, and leant down to retrieve my handbag from the floor. A Harrods sale would have been less traumatic than this spontaneous evening out, but as I sat back up, the barman had rematerialised and was waiting for me, wearing his ridiculous grin. "Can I get you another?" I opened my mouth to say no thanks, but a deep male voice answered for me, "Yes, and a pint of Stella." I glanced round in the direction of the unsolicited voice. It belonged to the stranger who had been sitting 6 stools away, but who was now perching on the stool right next to mine. So we'll leave it there until next time. If you're enjoying listening to the readings that I'm doing from this book, and reading the chapter 1 that's available, please go to kickstarter.com, search for When the Mask Falls, and pre-order your copy. They're available on there and just until the 2nd of March, so not long now, less than 2 weeks actually. And if I get enough orders before then, I'll be doing my very first print run next month, so that would be pretty exciting. And the good news is that there's nothing to pay even until the 2nd of March, so you can do that now, and you won't have to pay a penny until then. So thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully you managed to hear it all to the end this time, and you had the visual as well. So brilliant. Hope you have a good evening, what's left of it, and take care. Bye bye. Finish.